And we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm Liz Moore with Montana Nonprofit Association, and I'm glad you're here. So we're going to talk through a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll have time at the end for, well, actually before the end, we'll have 20 to 25 minutes, I hope, for questions. So let's rock and roll. Montana Nonprofit Association is, our goal is, our audience is not really the folks filling out the census, although it ultimately is. It is engaging nonprofits in being meaningful leaders and participants in the community so that we have a full census in Montana. And I'll go into some reasons why nonprofits are really well positioned for that. So here's what we're going to cover. A little bit of background detail on why it matters, some details about the census, the difference nonprofits can make, how to get involved, and then we'll talk about the mini grant applications. If you have questions, chat along the way, and Leandra is on, and she will, she's on as co-host, so she will help us keep track of those questions and respond to them. So here are the partners in getting out a strong count in the state. First of all, at the federal level, we have a team in Montana, and our good friend Jerry Busey is one of those partners. I believe she's on the call today. And then with the state of Montana, the CEIC is running the Census 2020 count for Montana. And then the Complete Count Committee is, the Complete Count Committee is at the state level. Oh, I have to share my screen again. Hold on just a minute for technical assistance. And we'll be back in just a second here. Okay, so right here. Okay, hopefully you can see the screen now. Sorry about that. Here's what we're going to cover. I'm only going back to it because it's cute. And here are our partners. And when I say our partners, these are partners to all of us in Montana who are working to get out a strong census count. The Complete Count Committee is at the state level, and then there are many, over 70 local Complete Count Committees. There are over 120 Be Counted sites, and we'll talk about how to figure out where those sites are. And then we have philanthropists who are making mini grants possible. So I want to mention Montana Community Foundation in particular as a leader in that, and then Montana, the Healthcare Foundation, Northwest Area Foundation, and others. So that's why we're able to offer mini grants, is because philanthropists are interested in that. And then of course the nonprofit community, which is a huge part of the network, which will get out a complete count for Montana. Here's why it matters. There are really three things, as far as messaging to constituents or anybody else. Dollars, there's $800 billion that'll be invested over 10 years from the federal government. And it'll be invested in many different places. And we want to make sure that Montana is well represented in that. And then data. I think probably the nonprofit community knows, maybe as no other than maybe state government, how important the data is as we plan and as we plan in communities. And then representation. So Montana is one of the states that's poised to gain another congressional seat, and it's also part of the state redistricting process. So some details about the census. First of all, it is, having a count of everyone who lives in the nation. It's kind of almost that elegant. Everyone who lives here, we are constitutionally required to have a count. In, I think, 1954, Congress decided that an every 10-year count was the way we're going to do it. So the last one was in 2010, and now we're here. Every person means everyone. And I guess I would stress that that is kind of the American way. And I think there's concern that that was politicized. That's behind us, kind of like water under the bridge. Now it's time to just get out the count. Postcards will be arriving in households, it says sent, but arriving in households in mid-March. And so every household, and there's a huge technology behind it using the GPS or the GIS system and all of that. So households will receive postcards, up to 3 of them, by mid-March. And if they don't respond to 3 postcards and go online or use their phone, which are the options, then they will get a paper census form to send in. If they don't respond to that, then enumerators will go door to door. So we'll talk a little bit about the barriers and how we'll address those barriers as a state. Census Day is April 1st, but the census count starts before April 1st. As soon as those cards hit the home, the kitchen table, that's when we want people to start being counted. And so that's 2 months away, a little bit less than 2 months. So, right now is the time to really start making census part of the environment, the nonprofit environment in every way, so that people are expecting it, looking forward to it, and want to participate. Then here are some of the barriers, as you might imagine, in Montana. Lack of internet is a significant barrier. And fortunately, there are organizations in the state that have done that are doing a lot of community organizing, that have, and also we have the federal staff who is out. We're hiring enumerators, and that's why we need you to promote jobs with census. So the only way we're going to get past lack of internet is people. And that's kind of how it works in Montana. And so be thinking about that in your service area. Where is there lack of internet? And then there's lack of comfort with technology. I think about my own parents, and they're just not terribly comfortable with sending any personal information. The census information isn't hugely personal. There's no social security numbers or anything like that, but people don't want to send that stuff, or they're just not that comfortable hopping on the computer. So who do you serve that might have a hard time with that? Typically, seniors generally are not a hard to count population. Will technology change that? Who knows? There are folks who don't read the mail. And so, you might be serving a group that that's kind of the habit, is to not read the mail. So you need to be thinking about, how do you encourage that? Encourage people to be looking for the postcard. And then there are, as I mentioned, cybersecurity concerns. So it's good to reassure people that the federal government is pulling out the stops on cybersecurity. And again, the census data does not include social security number. It does include birth dates. Lack of trust in government generally. I'm sure that's not an issue anywhere in Montana, but just in case it is, think about that, and think about how you message. And you may even message a way that says, kind of stand up for your rights, or whatever that message is that's going to resonate with your audience, if lack of trust in government is an issue. And then there are language barriers. In Montana, that is not as much an issue as it is in some places, but it's certainly a consideration. So do we have any questions that have popped up yet, or anything on the chat screen? Leandra?
Yes, we have a good question.
I can't hear you, so. Hold on, folks.
I'm not. I'm talking.
There we go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Nope.
How are unhoused individuals notified? You can hear me, Sarah? Oh, great. Excellent. So I will do some research. This is a very good question. I'm going to look at it right now, and then I will get back to all of you.
I can't hear. I can't tell. Okay. All right. So hard to count areas. Our focus for the mini grants is the hard to count areas. And we think of that in two different ways. One is geographic and the other is demographic. And I'm going to go out for just a moment and talk with you. I'm going to go off the PowerPoint and talk with you for a moment about geographic. So you are going to see, you're going to see my screen, except this isn't the one I want you to see. I want to show you the State of Montana website. And so hang in there with me for just a second. Because there is a great map on the Montana site. So here's Montana Census 2020. And you can see here the map section. And if you click on that, it'll take just a second because it's alive. And so it'll come to life here in just a minute. And the map section will show the hard to count areas. So that's one thing you can find on the state website. And I don't know why it's not coming up. The other thing you can find is the state be counted areas are on the map. And also the state, I don't know what's going on with that. And also the state complete count committees. So those are all on the state website. Sorry, that's not a very good show and tell. And then here's the federal website while we're here. There's a lot on here that is just outstanding in terms of resources. And it answers a lot of the questions about, here's a question about privacy. Here's a question about getting involved and spreading the word. So all of those things can be helpful as you're configuring your own messaging. Okay, let's see if I can get back to my PowerPoint. So you can see what my skill set is. It's really not PowerPoint. Okay, so geographic is one aspect. And here's a slide of screen share from the state site. And the darker red colors or brown colors, those are the hardest to count sites. And then you can see the undercount. It's a bubble chart, so you can see the undercount by the size of the bubble in that chart. And then, so, you see up here in the Flathead area, you see over here in eastern Montana. And then up on the High Line, there are areas, and very often they're associated with the reservation communities. There are a lot of hard to count communities and populations in Montana in addition to that. So as you think about a mini grant, look at that and see, where your service area is and how you will be targeting folks in those particular areas. Then here's the demographic hard to count groups. Children under age 5. So if you think about a Head Start, or if you are part of an resource and referral organization, that group is a hard to count group. Racial and ethnic minorities, I think we see that on our map with the Montana's Indian populations. Limited English, immigrants, folks who are here part of the time, they're supposed to be counted in the primary state of residence or where their primary home is. So we have snowbirds who leave and they're not back during census. So how are we going to reach out to the snowbirds in our communities? And then folks who are experiencing homelessness, if you are working in a rescue mission area or with people who are precariously housed or couch surfing or things like that, those folks are really at risk for not being counted. College students, and this is all college students. And so I know the universities are working to get ready for a census count, and the private colleges. And then single parent households. So, as you think about the populations you serve, consider these hard to count groups, because that really is the focus of the grants. So why nonprofits? Why are we called upon? I think the answers are obvious. One is we're located where hard to count folks are. So whether that's in, that's kind of the Montana way. We're in all these rural communities because that's how we get stuff done. And Montana has the highest per capita nonprofits percentage in the nation, although sometimes people dispute that, but I'll let them. And I think it's because of this, we're so far apart from one another. So we have to kind of band together as these smaller communities and get stuff done. And that's what nonprofits do. We also have access. We're in touch with the hard to count folks. And, there are people in Montana who are, like Western Native Voice is really working to organize the count on the reservations and with urban Native American groups. And but what I want to say about that is, because somebody else is taking the lead, that isn't, the question then isn't, oh, good, then we don't need to. The question is, what is our level of participation, and how can we be additive? Because we have slim resources in Montana. I mean, there are states that have several dollars allocated per person for census to make sure they have a fair count. Montana is just slender in terms of what we have for resources. So we need all of us to appreciate that others might be in leadership, but figure out what is our role in that. Nonprofits are also trusted. And I think that's one of the reasons for, really big reasons for community organizing, and that we don't just have a bunch of government folks out there enumerating. Nonprofits are trusted. We are, folks know us, we know them. And so everything is about relationships, and people are more likely to respond to requests that might make them a little bit uncomfortable when there's a relationship. Cultural competence, that's my way of saying the Montana way. So whether it's a language affinity, or knowing what message is going to resonate in, Garfield County or Richland County versus up in the Flathead or wherever, knowing what that message is because we're from the community. That's cultural competence. And so we'll be more effective because we have that. Also, we're visible, we're a known entity. And I think especially as we start thinking about events that will get out the count, that visibility is important. And then of course we have a vested interest. And I think this is a really important point, that our interest is somewhat, self-serving, right? Because if we're in health services, we want funding. But the ultimate goal of that is that our people get what they need. And that is the core of the message, is that children go to school ready to learn. And that whether you're in a town with a lot of opportunity or a town with a little of opportunity, you can find health services or access to higher education or agriculture. There's a lot of federal funding that is tied to census. And so all of Montana needs to come together and make sure this happens. But the nonprofit community is so mission oriented for our constituents. So that makes us a really good partner in census. So how to sign on to Census 2020, or how to get involved. I'm going to talk about 3 things plus 1, and I'm going to start with the plus 1. At this website, and we'll send this PowerPoint out to you. So at this website of mtnonprofit.org, Census 2020, support the census, you can sign on just pledging to be an organization that'll participate. And that is not a monetary pledge. It's nothing other than, yes, we will partner to get out a strong count. I hope you'll do that. We'd love to have 250 organizations on that wall. And so that's a little thing, but I hope you do it. And then 3 things. 1 is start with a plan. 2 is build awareness right now. We have 2 months. And 3 is plan activities to get out the count. And I'm going to talk for a moment about each of those. They all start with a decision to get involved. In terms of making a plan, a couple of things are important for nonprofits. One is just sit and not to overcomplicate it, but have a discussion. If you have staff, have a discussion with staff and decide who's going to be the lead on it. Make sure it gets on the board agenda, because you really want, those are your biggest ambassadors, right? And so you really want the board involved. Then determine who the community partners are. Every community should have a complete, or every area, it may not be in your exact town, but should have a complete count committee. If you go to the state website, I promise the map works. I've used it numerous times. You can click on your community and find out who's in charge, I guess, if you will, of the complete count committee in my community. Reach out to them, find out who else is involved, find out what other nonprofits are involved. Then, as you do your planning, how can you integrate this with your current work? If you have a senior center, can you print menus that have a census information on them? If you have a Head Start program, can you send projects home? Can you have children involved in creating postcards that get sent home? Can you have seniors involved in creating posters? Can you have a local artist involved? Integrate it with your current work that you're already doing with children, with families. If you're in the arts, there's a huge investment in the arts that comes from federal dollars through the NEA. So, how can you involve the artist community in making the census beautiful in Montana? Then seek funding. M&A certainly we have between $50,000 and $60,000. That is a pittance statewide. If you have a local philanthropist or organization who can help you with funding, seek that. If your project is a few $100s and you get some of that from M&A and some of it from elsewhere, that's great. That's more to go around for everybody. So I encourage you, folks are interested in how they can support this. Philanthropists are interested in how they can support it. So don't eliminate yourself from that particular type of request. M&A requests funding from larger foundations. We're not likely to go to an arts funder or a conservation funder and request funding for an effort, but you can. And then the other thing that you can do as part of your plan is, how will we promote employment? Employment is a huge part of this. What I don't know the details on this, but I do know that if you receive SNAP benefits or other kind of benefits, money you earn from census doesn't have to alter that. It doesn't have to, and I don't know the technicalities of it, and I apologize, but I know that if you receive benefits, you can still work for the census and it won't impact your benefits negatively. Okay, so that's making a plan. And I would suggest starting with that. And then building out awareness. There's a typo. So message out how you plan to help. So that's one way to build awareness, is to say, we will have computers here, we will have phones here, we will have people that can help you complete the form. Whatever you're going to do to help, message that out. Message out the importance of census to your constituents. That's another way to build awareness. Make a decision and find ways to promote census in all of your communications, whether it's your e-blasts, your newsletters, your brochures, your menus, whatever. You don't have to create something extra to message about the census. You can request awareness building materials. The state has a ton of materials, and they have a site where you can request materials from them. Stickers, posters, those cards that you put in card racks, things like that. You can hang posters in your building. Again, you can have a contest. If you serve youth or teens, have a contest for census and hang those posters. You can have buttons for your staff to wear, and you can have kids design those. So that would be a great grant request is, you know, a button maker and materials for buttons. And again, promoting jobs. How can you, if you have seniors who can be enumerators, that's a great thing to promote. And then get out the count. So there's an awareness phase, and we're, you know, by the 1st of March, we're really focused on getting out the count more than building awareness. So plan activities for that month-long period or longer that help you get out the count. So what would that be in your community? That's really where the mini grants come in and why they're community-based. We don't know. We don't know what the best option is for your community. Is it dinner? Is it a parent night with activities for parents and kids? Is it pens that you give to seniors when you deliver home delivered meals? Or is it information or something you give folks when they come in for weatherization assistance? If you run a museum or a performing arts center, what might you have that would encourage, what might you do that would encourage folks to come in on a possibly cold evening and fill out the census form? Or you can incentivize, you know, gas cards, Walmart cards, things like that, and have an event and do door prize drawings when people fill out the form. So remember, the point isn't the event, the point is to get the count. And so just tie your event to what you believe and what your community believes will help get out the count. And that's where really working in a collaborative way is going to be important. If there's something you think, you know, as a community, if only we could do this, I know we could get folks here and get those hard to count folks in to do the census. That's really what you want. And the focus is hard to count. Again, we have limited funds. And so we are all about the hard to count communities and groups. You can be a Be Counted site. There is information on the state website about that, and you can sign up now to be a Be Counted site and host events at your location. The state libraries or the libraries in communities are signed up to be Counted sites. So if you're not sure what to do, work with your local library, or there may be other places where folks come together in your community. So sign up to be a Be Counted site and make a plan around that. You could also be a part of your local complete count committee. And I hope you will be. I hope nonprofits turn out en masse to be part of the local count. And then of course, did I mention promoting jobs? That, you know, we need staff for this. So as you think about the mini grants, here's the information you're waiting for. The mini grants will go live on January 24th. We're working with Foundit. Many of you are familiar with them because when you apply for grants to the larger foundations in the state, most of them use Foundit. So it'll be that kind of a format. It's very simple. You do need to have a plan, and we'll post the grant criteria on the census website. So you know, I don't think it's posted yet, but so that you know ahead of time how to plan. But it's basically have a plan that targets the hardest to count, and that where a little bit of money would go a long ways. Again, we have 50 to 60 for the entire state. So while the ceiling on those grants is 5,000, that would be for a major collaborative effort that reaches a large community and a large N, if you will, a large number of people. So if you want to pull people together and come up with a larger application, we encourage you to do that. Many times, a few $100s makes a difference, and that's what we're trying to do, is figure out what is that difference that if you just have a few $100s, you could get it done. And we'll go until the money's spent. So, and it's a rolling application. We'll start reviewing applications the second week of February. So there'll be about a 3-week period there where the application comes in, and then I think it's around the 10th. So maybe that's, yeah, whatever, how many ever days that is, 2.5 weeks. We'll start reviewing applications then and awarding right away so that you can get busy. You know what the priorities are. They are the hard to count geographies and the hard to count demographics. And then the grant process is super similar or simple. We are asking you to agree to report back in by, I don't remember the deadline, I think it might be June 15th. So there will be requests that you report back in on what the results were. And really the result we're looking for is how many people did you reach? So there's the output, which is how many people attended, but there's the outcome, which is how many people actually did the census, who were in the hard to count communities and areas, groups. So let's see, here are some resources for you. Montana Nonprofit Association is certainly a resource. Not sure what's happening with my screen. We're a resource for you. If you have questions, you can email mna@mtnonprofit.org, and also look on our webpage, Census 2020, and be sure and sign the wall. And then State of Montana has outstanding resources, and if you need things that are kind of customized for your community, they can help with that. We can also help with that to a certain degree. If you have a need for something that isn't available, email us, and that's part of our job. And I think an advantage is we can have a really rapid response to that. And that's what we want, is to get things to you quickly. And then the federal website, I love the messaging, and you know, that people don't need to worry about cybersecurity, and or that your personal data is going to be shared inappropriately. They really have that. What are the fears and anxieties and concerns? I feel like they really have that dialed in. And so they can be quite helpful. That's what I have. Leandra, do you want to take the steering wheel for a while, and we can talk about whether there are questions?
Sure, we've had quite a few really great questions. I believe we've answered most of them in the chat. This last question was, if we submit a collaborative proposal, would it, with multiple orgs, would you consider more than 5,000? And the answer is yes, but it would have to be very, very compelling collaborative. Mm-hmm. This question, I have some locals concerned about immigration. Do you have responses for these problems? I do believe, and maybe Jerry can pop on, I do believe there's language on the census.mt.gov site about that.
There is. Jerry, do you want to respond to that at all? If you're responding, it's muted. There is information about that. There's a lot of concern about that, but there is good messaging around it. And I think, you know, finding the Montana message that this is a very American process of everyone being counted. That, I guess, if you're an immigrant, that might not be very reassuring given the flashpoints around the citizenship question. So I would say look on the, let's see, Jerry says reach out to your Montana Census Partnership staff. Oh, that's right. So Jerry, for example, if you look at the map, your census partner is listed. So there are places where Jerry is the partner, and then there are other folks as well. I see a question. I see a question. Go ahead.
Good question about could they use grant monies for incentives, gift cards and whatnot? And that's yes.
Yeah, I mean, just keep it reasonable because the money's going to go fast. And so, you know, what is it that will get people there? But they need to be there and fill the thing out. So, yeah. Any other questions? It looks like most of them did get answered.
Claire, you can talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I've got a question about, I was just looking at the Be Counted website and talking about how to become a Be Counted site. And it talks about how you have to have Census Bureau employees that help people fill out their forms. I was thinking of setting up our organization as one of those Be Counted sites, but that's another hurdle than to coordinate with getting Census Bureau employees here. Can you talk about that process, or how easy or difficult you anticipate something like that to be?
Sure. Anyone who's actually helping enter data has to be a census employee. So you can have computers and help people manage the computer, or help them manage their phones. You can help them do everything other than, you can't actually help enter the data.
Hi, this is Jerry. I finally got unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So yeah, that's exactly right. Just because Census Bureau employees have been sworn to oath and done a background check, they can actually we could take the information and plug it in for them. But for the rest of you, to a very large degree, if you just help them manage the device, get online and show them how to work the functions, or help them dial in, provide an internet hotspot, you are absolutely free and welcome to do that in every capacity.
Thank you, Jerry. There's another question about, is the definition of activity strict or loose? The definition is what will bring people in from hard to count populations and communities to fill out the census form. You know, is it a dinner? Is it a dance? Is it, you know, what is it that's going to bring people in with the goal of getting them to fill out the form? So you should know in your community what that's going to be. Or is it just incentives, like a $5 or $10 gas card?
Julie, did you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So the $500 that the nonprofit receives, that intent is really to pay for the materials to get all this done versus a fundraising for that not-for-profit. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes, 100% of the money has to go to activities that support getting out the count.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's not limited to 500. I mean, you know, I would say don't start with less than 250, you know, figure out what it's going to take, but I wouldn't start with less than 250, but you can go above 500. You know, it's going to be just a defensible case that this is what you need in your community to get out the count in the hard to count communities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, would it cover mileage if we were in a rural area? Sarah wants to know.
Yes, depending on what the mileage is for. If you are delivering, say, pledge cards or buttons or raising awareness, again, we're more focused on get out the count than building awareness. The state has done a great job of building awareness along with our federal partners. So this money is really targeted to get out the count. So if you have, you know, if driving to places is part of your plan, then yes. The census has 9 questions. Jerry made a point of that. And so one good message is 10 minutes. I've heard 10 minutes, 10 questions. And the questions literally are your name, your birth date, you know, do you rent or own? The birth date is the most personal of the questions. I think race, ethnicity is one of them. And then that is for every person in the household.
And Liz, there's a little more to that, and that was in response to sort of the, especially immigrant, all of those type of scenarios. I think that's been a very helpful message in a lot of places. This is not deeply personal information. It's not financial information. For the most part, if you have a Facebook page, I could tell more about you from your picture and what it says on your Facebook page than what the questions are asking on the census. So in terms of anything else anybody is doing in the state, they've had to fill out way more significant information than that. And I think just because of all of the publicity that has happened around the citizenship question, it seems to folks like it might be a lot more of a deep dive and personal information than it really is. So it's important to really stress that it is not highly personal information.
Okay.
And by law, it cannot be given to any other organization outside the census.
Okay. Thank you.
Jane says the most difficult circumstances are for those who live in combined households. How does the census identify a household?
Jerry, can you take that?
Sure. The census, so kind of think of the census as a snapshot of who's living in a housing unit at a certain point in time. So there is only one census form for every housing unit. It doesn't matter how those people in the housing unit are related. It does ask that question, but it doesn't matter if there's 3 families living in the same house, 6 roommates, what have you. The idea is to get everybody in a specific household on the same form. So there will only be one form per every household unit in the country.
So Jane, even if it's combined households in one place, that is a household unit. And then as far as folks who are in shelter, that there's a whole process for how folks in shelter are counted, whether that's emergency shelter, youth shelter, stuff like that. Kaylee, I see your question. Jerry, the question is, how would a domestic violence survivor in a shelter respond? And my understanding from reviewing the federal site is that there's a process for folks who are in shelter.
Yes, everyone who, outside of your regular households, for anybody that's residing in a long, sort of short to long-term way in a facility, that is done by a separate operation, and it's done earlier. And those are kept very confidential, specifically domestic violence shelters. That is done usually by the administration of the shelter with an enumerator. The census employee will go, that list is already identified. So if there's any new ones that have popped up as our partners, we would love to hear from you. But for the most part, there's a list of all of those kind of facilities. Then that's done in a different way, often through the administration of the facility itself.
And what about sober living houses?
Those are the same scenario. It's done in the group quarters process, and that starts earlier in February.
Okay. And I know foster care is that way. And if people are living outside, which, in Montana, that's kind of drastic. If people are living outside, then they are counted as outside. And that, at least that's what the federal site says. And then how will admins be contacted, Jerry, for the administrators of the shelters and group homes?
Currently, there's a whole bank of employees that work out of our Billings office, the area census office. And they go through, at this point in time, that's what they're doing. They go through all of those kinds of facilities that are residential facilities. So it's nursing homes, long-term hospitals, even dormitories and fraternity and sorority houses. So they go through and contact those facilities, and they make a decision at this point in time how they want to be enumerated. And so just depending on guidelines, they decide if they want somebody to come in and enumerate each person individually, or if they're going to essentially fill out the census forms for their for all of the residents in the facility, or the enumerator comes and leaves the forms and then comes back and collects them after the staff has worked with the folks in the facility to fill them out.
Okay. And then, go ahead, Leandra.
Yeah, John would like to know if Get Out the Count activities are allowable costs for Head Starts. They're a nonprofit, right? They can get out the count just as much as anybody else.
Let's see, I would ask a Head Start director that question, but having worked for Head Start for 12 years, I would say yes. But, you know, you should, I guess, ask, if you are the director, then ask the feds, but Head Starts are 501c3s, and this is private philanthropic money, so yeah, I see no issue with it.
Well, I can say already that they are doing it. So several Head Starts are doing it. So that's, I guess, from the federal perspective, I know it's already happening. So it has to be permitted.
Okay. Then, Jerry, there's a comment about folks living in sober houses being more obscure. You may or may not know about them. I think, Jane, what I want to say about that is that's where it's important for the local nonprofit community to be tracking. You know, if the feds don't know, they can't know. They have a pretty good bead on what the structures are from the GIS system and all of that. They know what the structures are, but they may not know it's sober living. And so that's where the nonprofit community really needs to be an advocate and be working with the complete count committees to make sure that those places are indeed counted. Jerry, do you want to add anything there?
No, that's exactly right. So a lot of facilities stay the same year in and year out, but like a lot of transitional living kinds of facilities, sober houses, we won't necessarily know that if we don't get help from our partners to identify it and put it on the address list to be counted.
Great. So we will post today it may be end of day, but we'll post the grant eligibility and kind of pre-look at the grant, if you will. The application platform is under construction right now. It won't go live till January 24th. But you know, this is an introduction to you to so that you have the chance to kind of get your ducks in a row, make a plan, and then figure out how can we best use these resources to help get out the count. Any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment. We've had 3 organizations sign on to our pledge in
Oh,
the
good.
last half hour, so thank you.
Yay. All right, spread the word too. And a huge shout out to the philanthropists who are funding the grants. You know, they're really interested in a full count for Montana. And this is a great vehicle. You all are the vehicle for getting out the count. So thank you. And thanks to Montana Community Foundation, Healthcare Foundation, Northwest Area, and also Headwaters. And others who we know will also step in. Okay, I think that's it. And thank you all for joining us. This will be posted at some point on the census page, but it can be a little intimidating to look at all the information on the 3 websites, the federal website, the state one, and the M&A one. But I encourage you, just as you're planning, spend like 2 hours looking at information, and you will be well set to create a plan that works for your organization and in your community. And remember to work with others. That's, you know, that's the power of us. So thanks very much, and we'll look forward to seeing your applications.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.